So we're reading from Bamidbar today, and you heard a long list of names being read before you. And I know those names are not so easy to read. Yosef will tell you it's not any easier in Hebrew. He was practicing over here earlier this morning, and like Yosef, he's like, yeah, these names they're tough. That's okay, trust me. So if you get stuck on reading them in English, you're not alone. They're ancient names, they're unusual names, and they're there for a reason. Imagine the honor given to a person that their name is actually listed on the pages of Torah. It gets copied and proclaimed all throughout the world. That is just an amazing honor. And so you can think and meditate upon what that means to have your name actually inscribed in the Torah scroll. That's pretty amazing. But a lot of this is about people and relationships. And Torah speaks about people and relationships all the time. And I wanted to ask you a question. It's kind of a personal question. You don't have to answer it. You know, it's rhetorical. Have you ever felt like you can't trust people around you? You ever been in that situation? Maybe even people who are close to you. Maybe you are there right now. It really is an awful feeling, if you know what I'm talking about, to be surrounded by people that you should be able to lean on, especially if you're going through something hard, something difficult. And only to realize that they're not on your side and that their loyalty cannot be trusted. It's an awful feeling. Sadly, this happens all the time. But then there's an opposite, and that happens as well. Hashem can absolutely give us friendships that support us through the toughest of times. Hashem can give us dear people who want to see us succeed and prosper. So both situations can be equally true in our life. It's just what we find ourselves in at the moment, I guess, is the question that we all need to answer. Our reading from the prophets today is the story of David and Jonathan. You heard this read. This is first book of Samuel, chapter 20. Now, not everyone finds stories to be very instructive. People just read stories like as if they're just novels or something like that. Now, I find stories very instructive. And this particular story is about a unique friendship, to me, that's how I read it, between two very notable men who could have been very much opposed to one another and could have been threatened by each other. Yet that is not what happened in their lives. David and Jonathan shared a uniquely close friendship as they looked out for each other. Throughout their friendship and relationship, that's what they did. They had no desire to oppose one another, even though the world around them expected for them to do just that. In this story, King Shaul famously says to his son, to Jonathan, that as long as David is alive, Jonathan's reign as the king of Israel will not be secure. He will not be successful. And that makes sense if we understand how the politics of that day really operated, as rivals were basically eliminated. Anyone who would be challenging you for the throne, you didn't let them be. You killed them off. And that's what Saul was talking about. Shaul, he assumed that kingship, power, control were all the things that Jonathan desired. But apparently that was not the case. Instead of rivalry, David and Jonathan were friends. And their loyalty towards one another was really held together by something much more powerful than selfish ambition. I realize sometimes how ambition and selfishness drives people, drives to do the kinds of things that, well, not so positive, but there is something much more powerful than that, and I see that in this story. So let me take you to a verse that struck me as I was reading this passage, that impressed upon me, and from there we will go to the message for us today. 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 23 reveals to us the reason why David and Jonathan were so close. I believe at least that's the secret sauce. Jonathan said to David, these are his words, Hine Adonai beini uvencha ad olam. Adonai, Hashem, the Lord, is between you and me forever. The secret of their friendship and loyalty towards one another is that they both recognized Hashem's hand upon them. I think so. The events that transpired all around them were much bigger than these men really were, and perhaps they knew that. I believe that they could see something way beyond themselves, something that God was doing right in front of their eyes. And maybe they believed that, that this was God working through their lives and their friendship. Perhaps that's why they were so close. In this story, Jonathan came up with this code, this warning that only him and David understood. It's like a special phrasing. If he calls out to his helper while practicing targets out there in the field, and he says to him, the arrows that I shot are beyond you, then it means that there's nothing David can do. That means that he needs to run. The arrows beyond means run. Saul is looking to kill you. And so it is the story as we read it, the tale itself, tells us that it's very likely that Jonathan actually truly saved David's life, because if David went before Saul, he probably would have killed him. Of course, Saul was looking to eliminate anyone who was a threat to him, and he saw David as a threat. But as we read the story, the question that we must always ask is, what does this mean for us today? What can this story teach us? Why is this included in the scriptures? And why did the sages pick this passage to be read along the opening of the book of Numbers as we read all those names? I don't know that we can answer all these questions all at once, but I know I can answer at least some of these questions. And as I prayed and meditated upon what can we learn from this beautiful story of friendship, 3 points came to mind. I know usually I give you 2 because that's all I have time to squeeze into, but this time you guys get a bonus, 3 points. Here's the first one. Be a friend to those whose seats are empty. Be a friend to those whose seats are empty. If you don't understand what I mean by that is that means that you haven't read the story. In the story, David's seat was empty. David's absence was at this new moon banquet was noticed because he simply was not there. The king set out a banquet. He invited all his important people. David was among them, and his seat is empty. And so his absence was noticed. The question I have is, are there people in your life who have left empty seats behind that maybe you noticed? I'm asking a question that only you can answer. And that answer is really meant for you. It's not for me, because I believe this is one of the reasons why we read the story this week, is to remind us of the people we're missing, to remind us of the empty seats and the wonderful bonds of friendship that we're supposed to have. If Hashem suddenly brings up somebody to your mind, as I point this out, as I tell you the story, then you know what you should do. Just go and be a friend to them. There are probably good reasons why the seats are empty. There are probably good reasons why they're not here. It's very likely that they could really use a loyal friend. And in any case, it will not hurt them if you just reach out and let them know that you notice that they're not there and that you care. Very simple. Be a friend to those whose seats are empty. Second one is this. Build up friendships where Hashem is between you. And I'm going to say this, don't be afraid to develop friendships with those who you feel are walking with God. But equally, with those who may not be walking with God, but you see God's hand upon them. This is what I mean. Sometimes we have people that we cross in our lives and we have this sense that God's hand is upon them. And maybe they're not walking with God at that moment. But the Lord is between you, and perhaps that relationship should be cultivated and grown. Recognize the role that God plays in your relationships, and recognize that sometimes He's the one who draws people together. Sometimes He draws very unlikely people together. People who are expected actually not to be friends. Well, David and Jonathan is an example. They should have been rivals in all situations of life. And if you realize that God Himself has played a role in forging some of your friendships, then build them up and strengthen them. Because if Hashem is the one who did this, the least you can do is build on it. If God is between you and your friend, then it is for a reason. You may not know the reason for a while, but it is Hashem's will. So build it up. My third point is hold those loyal to you in high regard. Genuine friendships are rare, and they usually endure through all sorts of difficult situations. Whatever you throw at good friends, usually they make through it. So I say stick up for your friends if someone mistreats them, and always, always seek their good. Yeshua, our master, He deliberately treated His disciples as friends. Did you know that? He even called them friends. In John 15, He said, "If you do the will of my Father, you are my friends." I call you friends, He says, because what I have heard from my Father, I have revealed to you. What He meant is that, you don't tell people everything, but you do share things, the best things that you know, with your friends. Yeshua relied on the 12 closest disciples that He had, and He held them in very high regard, even though they did not always understand His teachings, and even if when they lacked faith, He still held them in high regard. And they stuck up by Him. When He was being arrested on the Mount of Olives, perhaps you remember that story, Peter, he shielded his rabbi from the people who came to arrest him. He even grabbed a knife and attacked those who came for him. If you have friends like that, please hold them in high regard and show your loyalty to them. Because we all need friendships where Hashem is between us. And if you have a friend whose seat is empty, reach out to them. Go and be loyal and show your loyalty to them. Shabbat Shalom.